tout le monde, nous sommes ici pour vos questions, mais premièrement, peut-être nous pouvons vous offrir de petits commentaires. Premièrement, pour nous comme un pays unifié, on doit continuer de bâtir notre économie, notre pays pour notre avenir. That means that we will continue to fight for the sovereignty of our country while strengthening Team Canada right here at home. We are ready for any eventuality that comes our way from a Canada-U.S. perspective, and at the same time, we are ensuring that we are eliminating barriers to trade within our own country. The third angle is going to be diversifying supply chains. On doit diversifier nos chaînes d'approvisionnement. Ça, c'est crucial. We have to make sure that we are trading with multiple partners in multiple locations. Canada is the only G7 country that has a free trade agreement with every other G7 country. That means while we address a situation with the U.S., while we move to eliminate interprovincial barriers to trade, we are also ensuring that we diversify Canadian supply chains for Canadian manufactured products, for Canadian natural resources, for Canadian critical minerals. The bottom line is we need to leverage Canadian strength, and that is what we will continue to do from a Team Canada perspective. Donc, je vais passer la parole à mon cher collègue, le ministre Champagne.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to be back. We're just back from Washington. I can tell you the tone has changed, and that's a good thing. I think this morning the Prime Minister spoke. We had hundreds of business leaders, labor union, which were with us. This is Canada's moment. This is about Canada being ambitious. This is about Canada being confident. This is about Canada winning in the economy of the 21st century. I can tell you in our conversation we had in Washington, there's never been a better time to make the case for Canada. We know we have a reprieve, but we need to double down and making sure that our American friends understand the integrated nature of our relationship. The fact that we buy more from the United States than China, Japan, the UK, and France combined. And I would say Canada has everything to succeed. We have the talent. Let's be honest. Canada is a big magnet for talent. We have large ecosystem. We're a nation that build planes, that build cars, that build ships, that build microchips. We are a nation which has all the critical minerals to power the economy of the 21st century. We have abundant energy and renewable energy. And as my colleague said, we are the only G7 nation which has a free trade agreement with all the other G7 nations. So this is about diversifying our economy, diversifying our export market, and also perhaps diversifying how we import. So in this sense, we're going to be focusing, as Minister Anand said, well, a Canada free trade agreement, a Canada first procurement policy so we can buy here domestically, and at the same time looking how we can make Canada more resilient. So en français, écoutez, on arrive de Washington. Moi, ce que je peux vous dire à Washington, le ton a changé. Je pense que nos voisins américains comprennent que le Canada est essentiel pour réaliser la grande vision du président américain quand on parle de l'âge d'or de l'Amérique. Je dis, écoutez, si vous voulez réaliser cette grande vision-là, vous allez avoir besoin du Canada. Aujourd'hui, pour moi, c'est un grand moment pour le Canada. On parle d'ambition, on parle de confiance, on parle de résilience. Et vraiment, le Canada a tout pour succéder, pour avoir du succès dans l'économie du 21e siècle. On attire des talents de travers le monde. On était avec des gens ici du secteur des affaires, du monde des affaires, des gens des syndicats. La deuxième chose, on a des écosystèmes qui sont forts. Vous savez, le Canada fabrique des avions, fabrique des bateaux, fabrique des véhicules, on a des ressources naturelles. On a des minéraux critiques qui sont essentiels à l'économie du 21e siècle. On a en même temps des énergies renouvelables, on a de l'énergie en abondance. Et finalement, on est le seul pays du G7 qui a un accord de libre-échange avec tous les pays du G7. Alors, on va travailler ensemble pour diversifier notre économie, s'assurer, comme la ministre Anand, de dire qu'on a un accord de libre-échange à travers le Canada, et en même temps, qu'on repense un peu nos marchés publics, comment on peut favoriser les entreprises canadiennes alors qu'on bâtit le Canada de demain. Alors là-dessus, ça va me faire plaisir de passer la parole au ministre MacKinnon. Merci tout le monde.
Bonjour tout le monde et ça va nous faire plaisir de prendre vos questions. Mais moi, je tiens juste à dire J'ajouterai pas beaucoup à ce que mes collègues viennent de dire, mais personnellement, j'ai passé la semaine la plus inspirante que j'ai passée en vie publique et peut-être dans ma vie comme Canadien. Moi, j'ai visité avec des syndicats des entreprises dans le cœur de notre économie, les gens de l'acier, les gens de l'automobile, les gens dans ma propre circonscription. Vous savez, on compte sur une résilience et des atouts remarquables. Une résilience humaine, une innovation. Ce que j'en retire, c'est que le Canada va en sortir plus fort. One of the reasons we're going to come out of this even stronger is because we have natural stabilizers. We take care of our own here in Canada. It is, as I reminded Unifor workers or steel workers in Hamilton, trades workers throughout southern Ontario this week, we have, among our many advantages that François-Philippe and Anita talked about, is that we look after our people. And the auto worker in Ohio or Michigan or South Carolina cannot count on the solidarity and the stabilizers that Canadians have decided to give themselves in our economy. So should the worst happen, and we are by all means working to ensure that that does not happen, we are ready and prepared, and we will look after Canadians. But what I think will come from this is a version of the best. It's time to get on with focusing on our economy, focusing on what we can fix here in Canada, focusing on continuing to open ourselves to the world, and we'll do it with the best men and women that exist on the planet. Canadian men and women, des Québécois, des Canadiens, des gens à travers ce pays-ci qui ont fait preuve d'innovation, d'entrepreneurship et surtout de solidarité et de résilience, et ce, à travers les siècles. Donc, merci beaucoup.
What is the priority for the first 30 days? You said you want to protect the Canadian economy, protect Canadian workers. What can they expect if the worst happens in 30 days?
Well, we will be there with, obviously, assistance for Canadian workers, and that will take many, many forms. We will help businesses adapt to a new reality. We will help Canadian workers get through any kind of dislocation that occurs, and we will continue to adapt and add to that as time goes on, if need be. But what we're here today to do is not to talk about the worst case scenario. We're here with business leaders, with union leaders, with Indigenous leaders, with people from all across this country. One of the most inspiring sessions that I've ever been involved with, where you literally see much of the decision-making capacity of Canada in this room, committing themselves to our country, committing themselves to building our country, committing themselves to a renewed focus on our strategic advantages, on our people, and on making sure that Canada comes out of this even stronger than ever. And the message I want to send to Canadians is this country is strong. Don't screw with us. We will come out ahead. Je pense que vous allez voir que les gens ici sont non seulement inspirants, mais inspirés. On identifie ensemble les atouts du Canada, on les met sur notre bilan, on les comptabilise et on réalise que, hey, nous en avons des atouts, nous en avons des avantages, nous en avons des projets sur lesquels on peut bâtir. Oui, avec les États-Unis, si tel est leur souhait, mais avec le reste du monde. On possède, comme François-Philippe l'a dit, les ressources. On possède les gens parmi les gens les plus instruits et capables du monde entier. Et on a une géographie qui nous avantage, mais qui pose aussi un défi. Madame Anand, à part des chaînes d'approvisionnement, on va bâtir nos chaînes d'approvisionnement. Moi, comme ministre du Travail, je suis avec les syndicats du monde des transports. Ces gens-là veulent bâtir. On veut et on doit s'ouvrir au monde, on doit augmenter notre capacité en transport et en chaîne d'approvisionnement et on doit se recentrer sur cette capacité au Canada et sur la possibilité que nous avons à fournir le monde entier.
Well, I would say I was in Washington, and one thing that the folks, I was with Minister Blair, we talked with the defense industry in the United States, and one thing they understand, there cannot be a revival of U.S. industry, and I would say, without Canada. Canada is essential for the prosperity, the security of North America and the United States. And I can tell you, the tone has changed. You should have been with me in Washington. Tone has changed. You know, there was a time, this has been a wake-up call on both sides of the country. And I think if I want to add to what Steven was saying before, what's going to change after that? Confidence. This is about a confident Canada. This is about resiliency. This is about ambition. It's about time in Canada. This is Canada's moment, I think. You should have seen the leaders in the room. We were there. You have a renewed sense of capabilities. It reminds me of CDAO in 1945, where you reimagine an ambitious, prosperous Canada, where we started to build planes, to build cars, to build ships. You know, this is the, I would say also the golden age of America and Canada. And to your, well, I do that for 10 years. But to your question about critical minerals, I would say that American friends, and I was meeting with the largest defense industry yesterday. One thing that I made clear is that the supply chain are very integrated, and that Canada is prepared and willing to work with our American friends on the basis of mutual respect, respecting our sovereignty, respecting the dignity of our workers and our industry. And they understand now better than ever that you cannot pick on Canada and make life more affordable for Americans. You cannot pick on Canada and making sure that you rebuild your industrial capacity, and you cannot pick on Canada and make North America more secure. So I would say there's a renewed sense that U.S. industry, U.S. decision makers we met, they want to work with Canada. They understand we're essential for their prosperity.
Excuse me. I'm just gonna respond to the first question, which was the tangible results that we are going to see in the short term. And from the perspective of building our domestic economy, we will reduce and eliminate barriers to trade interprovincially. We know the end state. This is not theoretical. The end state for reducing barriers to trade internally is threefold. One, to establish mutual recognition amongst provinces and territories across the country. Two, to reduce the number of exceptions in the Canadian Free Trade Agreement significantly. Three, to ensure greater labor mobility across the country through easing the permitting and licensing process that workers across this country have to endure if they simply want to follow demand and go to another jurisdiction to work. Those are three recommendations that each of the provinces and territories have agreed to already, and the premiers themselves as well have empowered these ministers to carry this work through in the next 30 days. So the tangible results in the next 30 days for us to reduce red tape, for us to eliminate barriers to trade, and for us to build a domestic economy without going through Donald Trump is here and is now, and we will continue as colleagues to work on that together. C'est en français, nous avons trois priorités. Ce sont d'éliminer les barrières le tarif entre les juridictions, les provinces, les territoires ici au Canada. C'est le premier. On fait ce travail maintenant dans les prochains 30 jours. Aussi, la deuxième chose, ça c'est les exceptions de nos ententes avec tous les provinces et territoires. Et la troisième chose, c'est la main-d'œuvre, d'avoir la possibilité de réduire les barrières, de travailler entre les provinces et territoires. Donc, the reduction of red tape amongst provinces and territories is not focused on the infrastructure such as East-West pipeline. It is focused on reducing red tape so that infrastructure of any sort can get built, so that workers of any occupation can follow demand and work. And so we are not focused on the one particular infrastructure project. All options are on the table always, but our focus right now is on reducing red tape and eliminating barriers to trade.
I would say maybe
So let me talk about the federal perspective, because that's what I have jurisdiction over. Right now we have, no, I didn't share the numbers on that. 39 federal exceptions. We are looking to reduce federal exceptions to less than half. And those will include reducing the barriers to trade on financial services and on procurement. What do I mean? Right now, the federal government has duplicative regulation for financial services and insurance, and the provinces have their own jurisdiction and regulation there. We want to eliminate the federal red tape there. Also on procurement, we know that there is red tape in procurement. We want to remove federal barriers to trade there, so it's easier to compete for federal contracts. That's two tangible examples.
Well, I would say, and I just want to come back to the energy question before. I think Canadians have understood now that we need to be resilient when it comes to energy security. I think we live in a different world. Canadians have seen that the rules of the game have changed, and therefore you need to adapt. The worst we could do is to look back. We need to look forward in this country, realize that we are blessed with natural resources, with gas, with oil, with electricity. So as you're looking at that, it's not a one-way street, it's both ways. We may want to look also as how we can bring electricity to different provinces, renewable energy. We've been talking about the nuclear industry, which is booming. So I think that it is time as Canadians, as we have seen, now we need to be more resilient. We need to be bold. We need to be confident. This is our moment, and therefore, when it comes to energy, definitely, I've been talking to premiers, a number of premiers about that, making sure that they understand and that we work together when it comes to energy. To go to your question, I think standing up, I think one thing that we have learned, and I think the world has learned, you need to stand up, you need to be firm, you need to be confident, you need to be as well constructive. And I would say, you know, there's very few people who wake up in the morning in Washington thinking about Canada. And I would think it's probably the same for a number of countries. So you need to make the case in Washington to say, let's talk about security. Let's talk about supply chain resiliency. Let's talk about a growth agenda. This is a very turbulent world, and I can tell you these three themes that we have brought time and time again, we need to double down our effort. And I think I said to my American friends, you know, the world is watching how you're treating your best friend, your best ally, and your best partner. So therefore, let's work together on that because the world is watching. We've been talking with our European friends. We've been talking to people in Asia, and they're very much looking what's going on. En français. Attends. Oui, mais le monde change. Les mentalités changent. Ce que les Canadiens, les Québécois ont découvert aussi, c'est que les règles du jeu ont changé. Alors, le pire, ça serait de vivre dans le passé alors qu'il faut regarder dans l'avenir. Dans l'avenir, je pense que ce que ça nous a démontré, c'est qu'on sera toujours des partenaires de choix de nos voisins américains, mais les règles du jeu ont changé. Alors, quand les règles du jeu changent, il faut s'adapter. Et qu'est-ce que ça veut dire pour nous? C'est être plus résilient. C'est-à-dire de regarder, on a des ressources naturelles, comment on fait pour pouvoir les acheminer d'est en ouest. Ce n'est pas seulement le gaz ou le pétrole, c'est l'électricité aussi, parce qu'évidemment, on a, si je parle du côté du Québec, de l'énergie renouvelable. Et je pense que les Canadiens sont prêts pour avoir une nouvelle discussion. Je pense que c'est ça qu'on a lancé ce matin, c'est qu'écoutez, on vit dans un monde différent. C'est un monde où on devra travailler ensemble, remettre des choses sur la table et s'assurer qu'on puisse être plus résilient. Et évidemment, on parle de sécurité énergétique, on parle de sécurité économique, puis on parle aussi de sécurité nationale. Alors, dans un contexte comme celui-là, moi, je pense que les gens à travers le pays sont prêts à discuter de ces choses-là parce que ce qu'il faut sortir d'aujourd'hui, c'est un Canada ambitieux, un Canada confiant, puis un Canada résilient. Steve en parlait, la ministre Anand aussi. Écoutez, on est en train de faire de grandes choses, des choses qui auraient peut-être semblé impossibles il y a quelques semaines, voire quelques mois, mais là, il y a eu cet électrochoc-là qui dit à tout le monde, on va se retrousser les manches, on va être ambitieux, on va s'organiser de notre côté de la frontière, on sera toujours votre partenaire, mais sachez qu'on a des options.
I'm going to say, I think I would be reflecting the spirit in the room, and more importantly, the spirit across this country. Canada is free. Canada is sovereign. Canada will choose its own destiny. Thank you very much. But Canada is forever. So Canada will make its choices. Canada, as we all know, we have regions, we have political differences, we have debates, we have lively question and answer sessions. But Canada is united on one thing, its pride in being Canadian. And we will always, always, always stand up for this country, for its people, and for the ability to make our choices for ourselves. Thank you.
Can I just... Un moment.
Moi, j'ai un plan de prêt. Je veux assurer l'ensemble des travailleurs du Canada que nous avons un plan très prêt qui n'a pas besoin de l'approbation du Parlement. D'ailleurs, on ne passera pas de temps à débattre si on aide les Canadiens, si on aide les travailleurs. On va le faire dès le jour 1 si cela devenait nécessaire.
And just on the question that Steve asked and Tonda asked, the spirit in the room, the spirit around each and every table I have been at in the last 2 to 3 months, that's business leaders, that's government leaders, that's labor leaders, reflects one unified comment and response. And that is, there will be no messing with the 49th parallel, period.
We hear that in the room. What was the mood like in the room in terms of Trump's attitude, of what you were told by the Prime Minister of Trump's attitude towards Canada? Is it a hostile kind of an attitude, and is he serious about annexing?
Well, you know, my read of the situation maybe is like slightly different because I'm American, and you know, I think that it's very promising that the Prime Minister and the President are connecting. I think, you know, the President has been very clear that he is continuing to have the conversation around the annexation, which most Americans don't take seriously. I would say we don't believe, you know, generally that that's actually something that's real or in a real agenda. Instead, I think our perception is more that it is one from a position of negotiation and posturing and using it as leverage in the conversation.
Are you concerned? There was talk perhaps about using our critical minerals as our major bargaining point, that they need us, they need that. Is that something as an American that you're concerned about, that if you don't have access to our critical minerals, that is going to impact your economy?
I think that that's a huge point of conversation and a very important one that has been going on for a long time between Canada and the U.S. The connection of critical minerals and energy at large is an important conversation, and I think there's a lot of opportunity. And I just would like to say, maybe pivot to that. I think one of the things that I have been thinking a lot about is I think this is a moment that Canada and the U.S. should be doubling down on their relationship and deepening the ties and finding ways to stay connected. And critical minerals is a perfect way to do that.
Can you just restate your name and spell it, please?
Yes, Beth Burke, B-U-R-K-E. And I'm with the Canadian American Business Council. Beth, B-E-T-H. No, I'm sorry. Je ne comprends pas le français. That's all I got. I just think from a general perspective, Americans would never want to invade or take over or absorb Canada. We see Canada as our closest ally, friend, and partner. And so I think if you asked any everyday American, they would never assume that it would be real.
But there's no doubt in your mind that the Trump administration is interested in our critical minerals, and that will
Absolutely.
and that'll be a priority perhaps for opening up the NAFTA USMCA thing, that they will focus in on that?
I absolutely think energy security has been abundantly clear that that's a priority for the Trump administration. I think critical minerals are a huge part of that. Canada is much further along in developing their resources and have more resources than the United States. So it is a point of leverage and a point of conversation that Canada can lean into as they're looking at the renegotiation of the USMCA. I would say it's becoming more and more understood. You know, I think from the business perspective, yes, businesses and companies are very aware of how interconnected we are. Our workforces are connected. There's footprints on both sides. I think everyday Americans are quickly realizing how important this is, yes. Yeah, I think there's always concern about shifts or bad feelings between friends, but I think there's a huge opportunity here. We're in a moment of pause, and I think this is a moment where we can look to strengthen and highlight the importance of the relationship. I think increased costs, potential of decreased jobs, opportunities for Americans and Canadians is top of mind. That wasn't my takeaway from what he was saying. I thought that he had said there is a definite need to address and work together to tackle the problem that both of our countries and all three of our countries face together. And I think working on strengthening the border has been a long time conversation between the United States and Canada. I think it's a really good step that, you know, the government has put forward a plan to do something on that. My understanding of his comments was more that he was referring it to in relation to other countries. Thank you.
During the Senate confirmation hearing yesterday for Jameson Greer, there were many senators along the border who were talking about concerns they were hearing from business about tariffs and retaliatory tariffs. And Greer said over and over again, this is just about fentanyl moving over Canada's sort of fixing its border. Are American businesses reassured by that, or do they also think that it's...
I think we're perpetually hopeful, and I think the business community does a lot to be prepared, to be nimble, to adjust to everything that we face. I think that's something we've always done and will continue to do. Thank you so much, everyone.
Good evening. Good afternoon, I should say. It's not evening yet. First of all, I think today has been an exceptionally incredible but a wonderful day to see Canadians from a variety of parts of the country, from walks of life, business, labor, culture, community, First Nation community, all coming together for the greater good of our country. And those of us who are on the council can tell you how happy we are in terms of the unity of purpose that people have demonstrated in the room, but equally their commitment to keep working with the Prime Minister and whoever the future Prime Minister is how we continue this effort to ensure our country remains strong, but also remain a vibrant economic society so all Canadians can benefit from who we are as a nation in trading with our most important party, United States, but also working to ensure our own internal trade is going to be more dynamic than it currently are right now.
Thank you very much. Yes, so this has so far been, we've had an opportunity to have some really good discussions, and I'm very pleased that we've been able to be part of this event where so many diverse voices have been pulled together in order to have these important conversations. Just even in the last 20 minutes, you know, I've been speaking with spokespeople for working people, national as well as regional, business leaders in broad industries, resource industries, business leaders in who represent small business folks, stakeholders who have strong north-south relationships already. And we're hearing so many good ideas from folks already. And so what's really important is that we bring folks together and we sift through what the perspectives, the ideas, and the commitment. And what's inspiring is that there is a real sense of the moment amongst everybody. There is a prioritization of Canada and our economic best interests and the best interests of Canadian citizens. And I very much believe that while in some ways Canada can be vulnerable because of our relatively small size and population, it also gives us an opportunity to be incredibly tactical and ultimately strategic, because we can come together as quickly as we are right now and start talking about really impactful ways to punch above our weight. And so that's the kind of process that I'm seeing unfold, and I think we'll see more come from it over the weeks and months to come. I don't think we're going to get rid of everything in 30 days. What I do think is that there's a renewed commitment to letting go of maybe some of the historic rationales for some of them. And so there's a renewed urgency to the matter. And so I think as a result, we will likely be able to see some substantial and measurable reductions in those barriers, because it is time for us in Canada to be able to work east-west with each other rather than becoming as vulnerable as we have as a result of our default north-south orientation. And so, and I think everybody here understands that. So will we get rid of everything? Don't be silly. But will we have a measurable impact on those and start making progress? I think we're well placed to see that outcome.
Just one quick, just in regard to the same questions. I was just listening to the labor leaders talking about this issue, and one of the things they're committed to is to work to ensure provincial barriers do come down, but fundamentally they want to see workers' mobility from coast to coast become a priority in that. If you in a red seal trades in this country, if you live in Ontario, why should it be difficult for you to go and work in British Columbia? So I hope as the premiers are talking about it, they know they have allies within the labor movement to say, hey, if you have a shortage in BC and you need a pipe fitter, and I'm certified in Ontario, I should be able to come and work in BC, because ultimately BC benefits from that. Equally, Ontario benefits from sending a pipe fitter who's certified in Ontario.
Can we talk a little bit about east-west? Is there a desire for an east-west oil pipeline, energy pipeline? Is that clearly in play now? And also, can you talk about LNG for people out east? Or is that also that we want to develop those capacities?
So I would say that there certainly appears to be, again, a renewed interest in having conversations about east-west, east-west pipelines and west-east pipelines. And of course, the reason for that's so clear. I mean, here, you know, I'm from Alberta. We produce a lot of oil. Canada uses a lot of oil. What happens now to get that oil from Alberta to Ontario is that it crosses the border not once but twice. And that is silly. And we should be able to do better. And we should, through that, also be able to diversify our markets and create tremendously greater level of economic resilience when we face these kinds of crises. So I have been certainly raising that issue at every meeting. I've become a bit of a broken record on the matter, as Hassan can attest to. But I do really think it's important. It's a nation-building piece. It's something that I believed very strongly when I was Premier of the province back in the day, and that frankly every Premier before and since also believes, because it's about building strength across the country. With respect to LNG, yes, there is also a very robust conversation about how we expand that. Because it is another product that we can diversify our markets to and play a leadership role in. Obviously, there were historic barriers to those conversations in the past. I would say, and there's certainly been good conversation up to this point, that if we reapproach that matter, we need to draw in the folks who are impacted in strong partnerships. We need to have not only consultative partnerships with Indigenous peoples of this country, but also economic partnerships, and give them the opportunity to benefit from these kinds of infrastructure investments. We also need to understand that because of the historic uncertainty, there may be a role for government to play. But that being said, the final point that I made on this issue is that even with all the best interests in play, still we're looking at 5-10-year horizon. But that amount of time is actually a very short amount of time in the world of a country's economic growth. And so we should be thinking about those things. And I am cautiously optimistic that we have an opportunity to make progress where maybe we hadn't for a few years.
This will be last question. Premiers are not here today. So how can the council be so confident that all premiers from all the provinces and territories agree with the free trade and interprovincial free trade, willingness to, act on this? They could say we're not here, and so we're hearing from the federal level that Ottawa knows it best. So.
Well, to be fair, that's not true. The people that are here are from all over the country. They live in the provinces where these premiers reside. That's fine. He doesn't have to be here. He'll hear from the people who are here, are going to report back to say, not just in terms of what the Prime Minister will say to the premiers, but also what the individual who are here representing organization will say back to their own premiers. Here's a general consensus the country has come to, and we all agree that we should do these things for the better of Canada, because we're in this moment and this crisis, and Donald Trump have given us unity for purpose of the greater good of the country. So I think the people who are also here, not just going to come here and leave today, they're going to go back to amplify their conversation when they go home, to their own premier, to their own levels of government, to say we have to do this together because this isn't the greater good of the country. I think the premiers have already heard us on this point, because their commitment to work with the federal government to break down the barriers, provincial trade barriers, is already taking place. As a result, it did come up in the council, but they themselves were saying we need to start doing something on this. I think Canadians should have confidence that we can do better, and I think this particular meeting, even though the premiers are not here, should take it for what it's worth. These are broad sector of Canadian society coming together to say we can do better, and we should not wait for this moment to expire so we can go back to the way things were, because we do realize we have some tremendous challenges ahead. But more importantly, if we come together as one people representing one country, we can do far better without being threatened by the United States on our economic viability for their citizens, but equally for the success of the country.
Sorry, I just love this last question, so I'll just do my one little bit and then we'll carry on. And but I just want to say the key thing is, this is an advisory group. And from my time when I was Premier, you move issues along by both consulting, getting the best evidence, talking to the greatest number of people, and then bringing decision makers together. I am sure that individual premiers are doing this work as well. We're part of this and we're having the benefit of hearing from people across the country. We're advisory. The premiers are decision makers along with the Prime Minister, and I have no doubt that the information we hear today will be fed back into that other forum, and that's just how these things develop. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to us.
Hi folks, Benjamin Bergen with the Council of Canadian Innovators. So we're a business council that represents 180 of Canada's fastest growing technology companies. And we were invited here today to hear about opportunities and solutions for how we as a country can respond. And I think talk around obviously removing interprovincial trade barriers is important, but we've got to be pragmatic. That's only one small step. We've also heard lots of conversations here about how we need to expand into new markets because we've got a lot of trade agreements. The challenge is that we as a country actually only sell very few goods, things like oil and gas, wheat. And so part of the conversation that we at the council have been really trying to have here today is that we have to diversify what we sell the world, and we have to be the owners of what we sell the world. Because when you rely on a branch plant economy, when you rely on Volkswagen to create jobs in southwestern Ontario, when you rely on Google and Amazon to supply all of your government services, you are unable to have a sovereign country. And so if we do want to use this moment to pivot, if we do want to use this moment to do something bold, we've got to look at the areas of where the economy is going. Cybersecurity is a tremendous issue. We are experiencing mimetic warfare from the President of the United States. We must respond as we are experiencing mimetic warfare. And so ways government can quickly deploy dollars on things like cybersecurity to domestic firms will create solutions that can then be sold around the world. If we as Canadians are able to actually understand that the goods that we create will be bought because other countries are experiencing the same challenges, we will open markets. We will have goods that they want. We will be able to sell technology that is essential to survive in the 21st century. And so as we have these conversations, I think it's great that the premiers are actually finally talking about removing interprovincial trade barriers. But this is one very small step in a way for us to be able to create real wealth and prosperity in this country. Canadians are 25% poorer than the Americans. We are now 20% poorer than the Australians. We are 20% poorer than the Danes. So it's not socialism, it's not capitalism, and it's not a resource curse. We have to get our shit together and figure out the world wants and sell it.
What energy do you need to power the AI future? What energy do you prefer that can move fast?
Yeah, so on things like AI energy, obviously it requires a government strategy in order to be able to advance that. So if you're looking at things like nuclear reactors or hydro, those are areas where you would begin to build that. But what we have to think about is how are you building a holistic strategy to solve these problems? Sovereign cloud is essential. If we don't have sovereign cloud, which requires a tremendous amount of energy, which requires a tremendous amount of chip building and capacity building, in essence, we are no longer sovereign. It would be like if we gave the railroad to the Americans when we were building our country. It would be an absurdity. We wouldn't be able to survive if it had to be the Americans telling us what we could or could not run on our own railroads. So power is part of that. Energy is part of that. But also beginning to build the industries that we can then sell to the world will be how we actually get out of this crisis, not just in the next 6 months, but in the long term.
Was that your preference, that you want an investment more in nuclear energy? Is that one of the points you brought up as fastest to getting to that AI future?
So I think, look, building a strategy around how Canada should be solving this actually should be a collective process. What we at the Council are really trying to do is raise the consciousness that we actually need to be having serious conversations about industrial policy, where we actually begin thinking about what can we sell the world, what do they want, and how do we get governments to collaborate with our industry leaders that are actually building these firms. At the Council of Canadian Innovators, I work with over 180 CEOs that sell goods everywhere in the world. Those that are SaaS-based, those that are digital, they don't need trade agreements. They flow across borders. They have a much greater ease of them. And so as we're thinking about this moment, where can we begin to build towards the future? And I think that's a conversation we need to have as Canadians. And I often think that this discourse that we have in our country is often overwhelmingly dominated by foreign multinationals. You know, I think the people at the Business Council of Canada are good people. But when you have foreign multinationals sitting in your portfolio of advocacy and lobbying that you're bringing to the federal government, it pollutes it. So when CUSMA was being renegotiated, we had the Business Council of Canada providing incentives that foreign multinationals wanted around things like the digital chapter, so things like IP, data, standards and regulations, copyright. So as a country, we got some real work to do. We've got to clean up our system in terms of the way that we actually talk about these issues. And then we've got to work really hard to figure out what can we sell the world? How do we basically line this up and go forward?
Ben, are they just trying to save the economic furniture
Pardon me? Look, I think that these conversations are essential. I came to this conversation to try and get some of, obviously the message that the business community that I represent believes in, and really trying to bring it forward. I think we've had a government for the last decade, which has been a lot of communication strategies and not a lot of actual substance. And as William Blake says, execution is the chariot of genius. And so if we don't actually have, a strategy that is then executed on, you find ourselves in these challenges. So let's move forward together. Let's come together collectively. But we've got to come together as Canadians to determine what type of economic reality we want. If it's to be colonial supplicants to the Americans, fine. But if we actually want to build our own strong nation where truth, love, and justice matters, now is the time to do it.
Je peux peut-être amorcer un début de réponse à la question qui a été posée. D'abord, le président Trump est en train de mobiliser le Canada comme jamais. Je pense que la réponse a été très claire. Il n'est pas question que le Canada devienne le 51e État des États-Unis. Nous avons un immense territoire et nous sommes, je dirais, mobilisés pour faire en sorte qu'effectivement, notre économie soit encore plus forte. On peut faire affaire et on peut continuer de travailler avec notre voisin américain, mais on ne deviendra pas un État américain.
Je rajouterais qu'il ne faut pas se laisser distraire par ce... Excusez. Je rajouterais qu'il ne faut pas se laisser distraire par ce type de déclaration-là. On a une mobilisation qui est forte. Il faut travailler ensemble pour aider notamment le secteur manufacturier que je représente à passer à travers cette crise-là, à passer à travers l'incertitude qu'on vit actuellement. Et c'est là-dessus qu'on est concentré. C'était pour ça qu'on était ici aujourd'hui. Et on sent que le gouvernement est très mobilisé dans ce sens-là aussi.
Moi, je suis très optimiste et il n'y a rien comme une menace et une crise pour rendre l'impossible possible. Quand on est obligé de bouger et faire les choses différemment, on le fait et c'est pour ça que je suis optimiste sur ce sujet. Maintenant, quand je regarde les entrepreneurs à travers le Canada, qu'on soit francophone, anglophone ou allophone, ils et elles ont tous et toutes les mêmes défis. Et l'un des plus grands défis qu'ils doivent relever, c'est diversifier leur marché. Et pourquoi pas diversifier leur marché à l'intérieur du pays, ce qui est un petit peu moins compliqué quand on n'est pas habitué d'exporter. Donc, moi, je suis très optimiste et j'espère qu'on va garder le momentum et que les barrières qui sont restées érigées pour différentes bonnes ou moins bonnes raisons pourront tomber et permettre aux entrepreneurs canadiens de faire affaire à travers le Canada pour faire rouler l'économie.
Est-ce qu'on parle de la fin des cartes de compétences dans le secteur de la construction?
Si je peux juste me permettre d'ajouter un commentaire à ce que Isabelle vient de mentionner. On dit souvent que l'occasion fait le larron. Et actuellement, lorsqu'on constate qu'on est extrêmement dépendant du marché américain, donc d'un seul client, il est pour nous devenu essentiel de diversifier nos marchés. Jamais on n'a parlé de cette diversification des marchés comme on en parle maintenant. Le marché le plus rapide et le plus facile pour nous en termes de diversification, c'est bien évidemment le marché canadien. Alors, l'élimination des barrières réglementaires, elle est essentielle pour que les entreprises canadiennes puissent faire des affaires entre elles de façon beaucoup plus facile et ainsi créer de la richesse pour les entreprises canadiennes.
Mais c'est ça, mais on parle par exemple des cartes de compétences dans l'industrie de la construction. Est-ce que le Québec est prêt à revoir?
Si on n'a pas été capable de faire tomber des barrières réglementaires, c'est parce que beaucoup de lobbies se sont mobilisés pour des bonnes et des moins bonnes raisons, comme le disait Isabelle. Et moi, j'espère que tout peut être sur la table en termes de baisser les barrières. Et l'industrie de la construction est un élément qui est extrêmement important et qu'on doit considérer.
En matière de transport énergétique, il y a différents points de vue d'une province à l'autre, mais il semble y avoir des intervenants qui ont une volonté d'avoir un transport, disons, à travers le Canada. Par contre, au Québec, on se rappelle du débat sur Énergie-Est. Est-ce que c'est possible d'atteindre un consensus sur le transport énergétique?
si je peux me permettre, puis je pense que vous allez peut-être trouver un élément de réponse intéressant à cet égard-là, nous avons des valeurs au Québec et au Canada. Et ces valeurs ont fait des sociétés dans lesquelles nous évoluons. Mais en même temps, on ne peut pas ignorer que le monde autour de nous est en train de changer. Et si on imagine qu'on est seul sur une île, bien, on va se retrouver seul et malheureusement affaibli. Alors oui, tout doit être repensé. Je parlais avec des représentants syndicaux il y a quelques minutes à peine, où si on avait voulu faire ce débat il y a 2 mois à peine, nous n'aurions jamais été capables de penser, de l'envisager, cette discussion. Aujourd'hui, nous avons cette discussion. Et quelles seront les conclusions de cette discussion? Difficile pour moi de le prédire, mais il est clair que plus que jamais, le transport énergétique, l'indépendance énergétique, elle est cruciale pour le Canada. Nous sommes au cœur d'une guerre commerciale qui a été déclenchée par notre voisin américain. Et c'est clair que la souveraineté du Canada passe bien sûr par la souveraineté de ses frontières, sa souveraineté économique, mais sa souveraineté énergétique également.
J'ai déjà entendu monsieur sur la question, mesdames. J'aimerais bien avoir votre avis sur un autre aspect. Si on lève les barrières tarifaires entre les provinces, est-ce que vous n'avez pas des inquiétudes d'un point de vue de la langue? Est-ce que ça pourrait mettre en péril le français ou même la nation québécoise à un certain point si on enlève toutes les barrières tarifaires entre les provinces?
Il faut regarder comme il faut le type de barrières qu'on a en ce moment, notamment chez les manufacturiers. C'est beaucoup la question liée au camionnage. On a eu une ouverture du côté du Québec. Je pense qu'on peut faire tout ça tout en respectant la question de la langue française et du fait que c'est la langue officielle du Québec. Maintenant, il y a plein de choses qu'on peut faire de la bonne façon. On fait affaire aux États-Unis en ce moment. À ce que je sache, aux États-Unis, on parle pas mal moins français que dans le reste du Canada. Donc, je pense qu'on est capable de faire ça sans mettre à mal le français au Québec.
Je vais aller dans le même sens que Julie. Là. On n'est pas à nos premières heures d'exporter dans plusieurs pays. Bien sûr, on parle de l'hyperdépendance que nous avons au marché américain, mais quand même, on exporte en Europe, on exporte en Asie. Et la question de la langue en est réel pour nous quand on exporte et quand il y a des compagnies qui font la même chose dans le sens du Canada. Je crois que chacune des provinces a des attributs à faire valoir et il n'y a pas de risque qu'on perde ce bel attribut qu'on a au Québec d'être une province francophone. Well, thank you very much for this question. We were standing ready this weekend and Monday to step in. And we are still ready to step in. We will not for now deliver any relief programs, but we've adapted our strategy to make sure that we're there for entrepreneurs that need us in that very special moment. And from a BDC perspective, right now, with no tariffs on, but still with this reality that is still very real, we do believe that we need to deliver non-financial support to entrepreneurs so that they know very well what they need to do differently right away so that they can adapt to this evolving environment. I'm not going to go into details because we were awaiting to see what tariffs would be on, and we were ready to adjust. So I'm not going to get into details because we're not dealing with any tariffs right now.